The letter arrived on a windless Tuesday, its paper thick and yellowed, sealed with wax the color of dried blood. Eleanor Vance read it 3 times before she allowed herself to believe it. Greywick Hollow. Her name on the deed. A great-aunt, Wilhelmina Vance, who had lived and died alone in the school's crumbling staff quarters. Eleanor was not impulsive. She was measured, skeptical, a woman of ink and parchment. But something in her stirred. Not longing, not curiosity. Something older, something bone-deep. The road to Greywick was not on any current maps. The further she drove, the more the GPS flickered, until finally, it went dark. Trees crowded the road like sentries, their branches bare though it was early autumn. Fog rolled in and never quite lifted. The school appeared around a bend like a hallucination. All spires and turrets, Gothic windows like blind eyes. Ivy crept up its flanks like a noose. The iron gates groaned as she pushed them open, and the gravel crunched beneath her boots like brittle bones. The air inside the school was colder than the valley outside, as if it had forgotten the sun. Dust lay like ash on every surface. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally. Once, twice, then a third echo behind her own. She turned. Nothing. She found the staff quarters untouched. A journal on the bedside table, its entries trailing into madness. Mentions of the mourner and children that whisper when the moon is full. Wilhelmina's final entry was illegible, scrawled so fiercely the paper tore. At night, Eleanor dreamed of water pooling beneath floorboards and children with mouths full of ash, of laughter echoing in locked rooms, of a figure standing in the mirror that was not her reflection. Then came the murmuring, low, constant, behind the walls, words she couldn't quite catch. It followed her from room to room. Her recordings picked up static, and underneath, the faint sound of children weeping. Eleanor discovered a hidden stairwell behind a false bookshelf. Down it led, far beneath the foundations, to a sub-basement lined with red-stained tiles. There were desks, chains, children's drawings etched into the stone with fingernails. The truth bloomed like mold. Greywick had not been a school. It was a sanitarium, one of the state's forgotten reformatories, a place for orphaned children considered unclean of thought. The mourner had been a doctor. His methods were crude, and he believed in silence as sanctification. He cut out tongues, buried children in the walls to quiet the devil's voice. Eleanor found a name scratched into the wall in her own handwriting. She had never been here before, had she? Reality fractured. Eleanor awoke one morning to find the sky outside the window was not blue, but gray. A color without temperature, without movement. Time no longer moved properly. Her watch spun backwards. She saw her own figure in the garden, digging, smiling. The journal began writing back. The building breathed with her. Doors opened before she touched them. Mirrors fogged when she passed. And the children began to appear in the corner of her eyes, limping, crawling, heads tilted too far. She remembered then. The smell of antiseptic. A cage of iron bars. The white room. The scream that wouldn't leave her throat. She had been a patient. She had buried it. The Vances had put her there to forget her. Greywick had not summoned her. It had waited. On the final night, Eleanor stood in the main hall, the fog now creeping inside through broken windows. The mourner stood behind her, his mouth stitched shut, holding a book bound in skin. The children surrounded them. Not to harm, but to keep her here. She was the last. The final whisper. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came. In the morning, Greywick Hollow was silent once more. The fog thick as blood. The windows watched. And far below, the murmuring began again. Eleanor no longer trusted time. The sun never rose. It simply shifted, dull and uncertain. The clocks in Greywick spun at odd intervals, some slow, some racing like a pulse in terror. Her phone was dead. She wasn't sure how long she had been here. She wasn't sure she hadn't always been here. In the south wing, beyond the rotting music hall, she found the pit. It wasn't marked on any of the building schematics. A ragged hole in the floor, lined with bones. Not fossilized, not ancient. Fresh. Picked clean. Something scraped below, dragging itself in circles just out of sight. The air above it vibrated, as if the space itself rejected light. There were teeth marks on the stone around the pit. Children's teeth. And as Eleanor leaned over the edge, not daring to breathe, a voice whispered from deep inside. "Come back." Driven by a compulsion she couldn't name, Eleanor returned to Wilhelmina's journal. She found new pages that hadn't been there before. Her own thoughts written in a voice she didn't recognize. The ink smelled of rust and decay. The script became less human as it went on, looping, spiraling, collapsing into sigils. She wrote through the night. When she awoke, the quill was embedded in her hand. Blood had soaked through the last page, forming an intricate symbol that pulsed faintly. She tried to rip the journal apart, but the pages would not tear. The book screamed. There were now footsteps in the attic, heavy and deliberate. She hadn't gone to the attic yet. The stair to the attic groaned as if resisting her weight. Cold radiated down from above. At the top, a door, painted black. No handle. It opened before she touched it. Inside, hundreds of dolls sat facing the walls. None had faces, just blank porcelain or scorched fabric. In the center, nailed to a child-sized chair, was the mourner's mask, stitched from flesh and sewn over bone. The eyes behind the holes were moving. On the walls were hundreds of photographs, all of her, at different ages, in places she didn't remember being. One was of her as a child, standing at Greywick's gates, smiling. She began to scream, but only dust came out. The mourner appeared only at night now, in reflections and the corners of rooms that shouldn't exist. He moved without sound, without air displacement. His presence brought nausea, vertigo, and the scent of scorched milk. She saw her own skin flake in mirrors, revealing eyes beneath. The children began to sing. They sang in rooms with no floor, walking on air as though it were ice. Their mouths didn't move, but the sound was unmistakable. A lullaby she had forgotten but now remembered too well. Little bones in beds of coal, never speak, and never grow. Eleanor stopped sleeping. The mourner's book appeared on her bed one morning, wrapped in sinew. She dared open it. Every page showed her death in a different way. Eleanor tried to leave. She made it to the gates, but the valley outside had changed. There was no road, only forest, thick and endless, trees so tall they vanished into blackness. She ran for hours, returned to the gate again. The same. Greywick had swallowed her. She was no longer a guest. She was its final truth. In the chapel, she found the mourner's name carved into the altar, and below it, Vance, her family, her blood. Wilhelmina had been the mourner's daughter. She had tried to contain the evil, but it required a blood heir to seal the cycle. Eleanor was the final offering, and now she heard them calling, in her own voice.